Lucia Carl's voice teacher here with our weekly episode with voice series. Today I will analyze and I will start explaining a little better, because I know it's not yet common knowledge. It will be in some years, but as usual it takes a little time to start changing and seeing what in knowledge and in innovation we are doing. On my presentation on joint and voice at last PEVOC last August in Tallinn for the Pan-European Voice Conference, I had the pleasure and the honor to participate as presenter. It was the first time I was proposing something to conferences, so it was very happy that I was accepted in all the three abstracts I proposed. So this is the presentation, because I made 2 one-hour workshops that will not be presented publicly, and they are part of my work and my courses, and they're part of what you do with me when you have lessons with me or when we do a workshop together. Why I want to explain it and I don't just tell you go and listen to it, because there it had to be scientifically sustained, this point, quite fastly, with no, and it was for professionals, and not so explicitly explained step by step. And the point is very important, is innovative in the sense that what you usually find, since a lot of time, could say also perhaps a couple of centuries or something more, is that movement and postures and some kind of body way of management are used to help singing. The innovative point here is that it's more precise. It gets into precise not only relations but mechanisms. This is what I'm doing since 15 years for voice teaching, before for me, before for host training, that it was something of the kind, but I will not get there today because I can easily get on the side and lose the time. So we start listening to it. We know that the vocal system is into the body and into specific segments of the body. It uses muscles and structures having multiple functions. Probably some of you know on those better than me. Today we focus on the respiratory and vocal and postural functions with a joint-to-joint approach. And the question are how they correlate in precise terms. And yet we are. When you think, and it's the reason I started those voice series, when you start thinking at voice, you usually think the air, the vocal folds, the tongue, the jaw not to be too much constrained, meaning stiff, or too tense if you want. Some posture to be straight. For some falsetto freaks you have to come in the front when the high notes don't come out. Some say to do some gesture with your arms, but generally you think to get effective with the air and to make your vocal folds produce the tone by the air. Yeah. And this is in some sort is the reductionist view, quite correct, still reductionist on the vocal system. The vocal system is into a bigger system, that is the body. And the body is made of bones, joints, muscles to move the joints and to move the bones and the other joints, as we've seen agonist, antagonist, and we cannot think a system without thinking agonist, antagonist in the same movement. All the ligaments, all the tendons, they are getting to absorb some part of the tension that we are creating, some part of the work if you want. They are all the time stretching in some sort. And there will be a movement into the joints, so there will be the creation of a tension. When you think of the air, you just train the air by controlling the quantity of the air. And if you look at Michael Trimble and the bel canto and what they've taught me and what I've learned and what I studied and what I read from great treatises was you don't want too much air against the vocal cords. And this is a preaching that doesn't want then not having a pressure, not having a tension, not having drive into the voice. Simply you don't want this to become, as a smart student of mine told me, a geyser. Exactly. You want to create a sort of pressure and tension under the vocal folds when they are closed that the vocal folds can sustain. How? And this gets very complicated in many ways, but we just can say you must not exceed the pressure that the vocal folds can sustain when closed by themselves with the help of some muscles. And for the air, as for the vocal folds closed, we use the help of some muscles. And those muscles are some recognized directly as respiratory muscles, some others I'm making an hypothesis, and in some cases it's nearly a thesis because I have so many results in so long time constantly that make me think that we can make the case quite reasonably, and not just because I have the idea and the intuition, because looks like there is something there quite reliable and consistent, and not only by me but by other researchers and studies and ways of behaving of those muscles. And those muscles, respiratory, are just respiratory muscles. No, we use for other functions. And what is interesting is that in some other fields they've used the same muscles for other purposes, because those muscles are not just purely respiratory. Also the diaphragm, that is the most purely respiratory, is not just purely respiratory. So I went to the conference saying, not directly how to work on the joints for the voice, because the first point was, does joints not close to the vocal tract or not directly involved into what yet established as part of the mechanism, even if not in the vocal tract, as the lumbar segment, meaning all the core, the abdomen, and under the diaphragm, that is strongly established. The thoracic segment is nearly vocal tract. I'm working on there also in a specific way, but again, it's established. But to me, the most important there was, okay, is the lumbar segment established? Absolutely, yes. So, do some dysfunction, note on those fundamental parts, yet established, have a role into voice production. Do they have an effect into voice production? And I use the joint-to-joint approach. The joint-to-joint approach is an approach for which probably you don't have an idea. You don't know where it was born and why. But if you get in any kind of gym, the tool, the principal tool of this approach is there. And it is a very important and powerful tool for assessment, for injury prevention, for rehab also, because it tells in a synthetic yet very reliable way and very simple. That is really great when we have those kind of tools. And usually when we have a tool that gets to that kind of simplicity in application, it really has some fundamental behaviors and mechanism inside. Otherwise, we cannot simplify that much. And that is when things get interesting. So, using the joint-to-joint approach, the point was, and is, the joint-to-joint approach says that a dysfunction into a joint will transfer to the above and or below joint. So yet, the hips, if the hips are dysfunctional, your lumbar tract is going to have some ratio of dysfunction. And so, will it have an effect on the vocal system and voice production? Yes, because it's having an effect on the lumbar segment. Then it is, and the question I was posing there, because I posed more questions than answers. At the end, not at the end, at the half, I showed some answers and some patterns and some tools for voice use that I use since 15 years with results that usually are said to be miracles. Of course, I do not do miracles. Clearly not. I'm very happy that I don't. So that it's knowledge and it can be used by others, developed by others, and just get into the tools, the options, and the freedom we have by knowledge of how applying these on other joints. But the joint-to-joint approach is telling us what? That if you want, so just a step back, dysfunctions and compensations. A joint is dysfunctional when, synthetically, it cannot provide the function that, again, synthetically and pretty smartly, the joint-to-joint approach has found as a primary into a joint. So it has divided the body into many joints, the principals, ankles, knees, hips, lumbar segment, thoracic segment, neck. I will add this part because we have muscles inside, and I'm working on that to give tools to singers too, and the feet. But the joint-to-joint approach, it doesn't address that, or it didn't address that, but it was good enough because mostly we work with those joints and it is simple enough to be well understood, well applied, and synthetic. The thing is that I don't know if you know that they don't have the same amount of flexibility and stability required for those joints. And this was the great point of joint-by-joint approach. He assessed what? That they have a preference, we can say like that, in a synthetic way, toward stability or mobility. Being mobility, the movement on more planes of motion. Just to say, the hips move on 3 planes of motion: sagittal, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal rotation of the femur, for example, external rotation. There are 3. And it's a joint that wants to be mobile. And they alternate those functions. The knees, you know that they really don't want to be mobile. They want to be quite stable. Doesn't mean that they don't have some sort of mobility. It means that they move between flexion and extension, and that's it. They don't want the rotation. They can resist some rotation, but generally is the weak point of the knees. The ankles want to be mobile, alternated. Ankles mobile, knees stable, hips mobile, lumbar segment stable, thoracic segment mobile, neck stable. I said something in the conference that I retreat, I don't agree with myself anymore, that the larynx wants to be mobile and is into the cervical segment that wants to be stable. I will have to study the question because I'm not so sure that she wants to be mobile. She wants some mobility, but at the same time, she wants to be stabilized. by the muscles of the neck. That is one of the great problems in singing, to stabilize the larynx. So I don't agree with myself anymore. I was probably wrong. And you know, it happens like that. You said something, and the step you said that, then you realize that it was not a good step. Like when you sing, you have to sing something to change idea about. You have to expose your ideas out to change idea. To say, no, on that it was weak, my point, and probably not right. So probably I was wrong there. I will study better the question because it's important. And so that the point was, okay, do these functions in the knees can be something to look about for voice. In here I would open a path, I hope, to a more sophisticated thoughts and directions of researching and getting specific in what, how, why, when of those correlations. I know it's quite ambitious. And if as an effect on the vocal system or a direct contribution, so to be the vocal system thought in a less narrow way. I know it is more precise the more. So what I say that my discussion here and my points and my research and my work are not yet the end of a model. Of course I started thinking of a model, but I don't have the pretension or the ambition to have a correct final model. No, it is a model that can be useful, probably contains something absolutely straight right, but yet the ambition is to open the path and the discussion about something that was totally overlooked in that precise terms. Because you have to realize that till before that, very often they told me, no, there are not correlations in between thighs and voice production. The thighs have muscles of the hip joints. So yeah, they have a correlation. And the path I'm opening, because in science and in knowledge we progress by making hypotheses that are which are not that much models or answers, but they are more correct ways of looking at a problem. To look better at a problem, you must have some answer, more than previously, but it's not to have the answer and then to close the discussion, but it is more to have some points that are, how can I say, more correct to see in wider terms the question. Wider terms is more complex, more horizon. And as I said other times, it is the difference in between. He must have a voice yet formed, then I can train him into the style, or to say, at least he must be able to progress when I ask, meaning to learn. So the people that I'm going to selection will be a very small group with the first, a bigger group with the second, and going on and on, it gets more inclusive, with just a path and options for many things. So not only for this style of classical music, otherwise, no, sorry, there are not options for you. It's no, we have many options. We have not the truth, reality, ultimate, quite difficult to get there. But we go closer. I will go closer by getting more refined into a view that is less narrow. And I am the one opening the discussion on that. And here it is. If they have something to do, we have to see in which ratio, in which way, how they correlates, and especially if it is a problem of dysfunctions that has to be addressed at the best we can, or it is a contribution from parts that we did not think previously, having a direct effect, meaning order, meaning being part of vocal system, that when they are dysfunctional, of course, they take away the voice and they take away a lot of things, but it's not enough to take away the dysfunction. They can become part of the orders. To me, that I don't mean that the vocal system is narrow, but I would like to get precise with some other contributions. I can think that as the postural is a big box with a smaller box inside. Being the smaller the vocal one, the smaller is into the bigger. They are independent in some ways, share some parts and even something more tricky as the. And it is important that we be the last thing for today. I say, just to explain better and to have a vision more easy to see of the vocal system being part of the body and smaller, as a small box, and the body, the big box, containing the small box. If you think of a big box and a small box, and the small box is into the big box, you can understand that if you move, or you crash, or you flex, or you create torsions into the big box, you will have an effect on the small box. This effect will be always important, always relevant, so not relevant that you can ignore completely. It depends, and is the point I'm making. I'm saying we have to start thinking, to study, to assess, to say which are the mechanisms, which are the conditions in which it is relevant or it is not relevant. So today I was doing that because next week I will be again as a presenter, again of 3 abstracts. Yeah, I submitted last time 3 abstracts because I said to me it's a good number in the time, but I wanted to present more generically as first, just to say it has a sense what I'm talking about, because it was the first step. The first step is, has it a sense, or we have to believe you? No, you don't have to believe me. Science is there, is yet there. And it has said, yes, I just give an option of possibility of action on voice of that, because it's yet 15 years of experience on that, and I can say of successful and very happy experience on that, in which has happened many things that usually don't happen in voices, and are really, how can I say, the substance of the meaning of my work. And I submitted for the Voice Foundation Symposium, that is the conference in United States. PEVOC is the conference in Europe. So it was to make you think about that, because next week in Philadelphia I'm going to present other 3 abstracts, this time in the form of posters, more specific, and I will talk to you about those, or I will do my video series from there with some material I'm going to take there, and then I'm going to resume when I come back. And it was okay, before disclosing, after the presentations, the material of the posters, it was nice to start explaining a little. So I wanted to help step by step to explain it. And I will go on explaining it, not today. For today, I leave you with those. If you want to, you listen to it, or you just wait for the other episodes. And next time it will be from Philadelphia. Have a nice week. Another recap. We know that the vocal system is into the body and into specific segments of the body. In vocal and postural functions with a joint-to-joint approach. The first thing, if the joints are stiff, as it happens very often now, they will find and they will try to start to get the movement in the upper and the lower joint.